If there was only one site on Earth that was actual tangible evidence of a mysteriously lost ancient advanced civilization that existed in our prehistoric past, the enigmatic site of Baalbek, Lebanon is arguably the most profound example above all else. And although there are other ancient sites around the world that are evidence of a lost civilization, by the end of this video you will see why Baalbek is literal proof of it. And I had the great privilege of visiting this site last September, and what I witnessed completely blew me away, as it was confirmation that what was achieved at this site far exceeds the known capabilities of the ancients. In fact, Baalbek contains one of some of the greatest feats of engineering known to mankind, which includes some of the largest stone blocks that were ever moved, lifted, and stacked in all of human history. And not only that, the largest stone columns ever constructed in all of classical history. But even more impressive is that this site also contains the largest stone monoliths that were ever quarried in all of human history. Yet somehow, we inexplicably do not know who did it, how, or even when. And although modern historians credit the Phoenicians and the Romans for constructing this site, when you research the nuanced details, you quickly learn that this is nothing more than unsubstantiated guesswork. And more likely, the reality is that the Romans found this site and built upon it, as you will see in this video. But as I just mentioned, this site is made up of some of the largest stone blocks that were ever moved, lifted, and stacked in the history of mankind, which are these three behemoths known as the trilithons. And pictures simply do not do these ultra-massive stones justice, as they are 19 meters long, or just over 62 feet. They are 4.2 meters tall, which is just a few inches shy of 14 feet, and they are 3.6 meters thick, which is just shy of 12 feet. To put the sheer size of these stones into perspective, consider that the height of an NBA basketball hoop is 10 feet, or just over 3 meters. And forgive the rough illustration, but consider that these stones are closer to 1.5 times taller than a basketball hoop. And because these stones are so high up, and in fact 30 feet off the ground approximately, the pictures having been taken with an ultra-wide camera lens, you totally lose the perspective. But what your eyes witness in person makes your jaw drop. And each of these stones weigh in at a whopping 800 metric tons, which equates to nearly 900 imperial tons apiece. That's over 1,750,000 pounds each that were somehow transported a half mile from a quarry before being lifted and perfectly stacked approximately 30 feet off the ground. But to put this unbelievable weight into perspective, these stones are literally 10 times the weight of the 80-ton granite stones that were lifted into the Great Pyramid of Giza, which in itself is a profound mystery. And the trilithons make up the foundation of the Heliopolis, which the Temple of Jupiter was built upon. And this is where you'll also find the columns that are the largest in classical history, reaching a height of 65 feet or 20 meters, and they are a staggering 8.2 feet or 2.5 meters in diameter. Many of them have fallen down and broken over the millennia. However, when you compare them to people, you can ascertain their truly imposing magnitude. But this is where the profound mystery gets wild, because you would think that a structure that contains the largest stone blocks and columns in human history, which again, modern historians claim was created by the Romans, you would think that we would know who built it, how, and when. I mean, the Romans were renowned for documenting everything. Yet, the Temple of Jupiter is absent of any historical record. Again, to be clear, it is unknown who built this, how, or when, which raises serious questions. It seems to me that the reason for the total lack of documentation is because the Phoenicians nor the Romans did not build the most impressive features of this site. They simply found Baalbek and built on top of it, as has been done at various ancient sites throughout the world, throughout human history. In fact, you can distinctly observe that there are 2 and arguably 3 different construction methods that were utilized here, as the varying stonework couldn't be more obvious, and appears to be recycled from prior destruction. In fact, it is totally ridiculous to even suggest that the original builders of Baalbek would create something so astounding only to finish it with such comparatively lazy and inferior construction. And honestly, not to be a smartass, but anyone that grew up watching Sesame Street can clearly see that one of these things is not like the other. Which is why it's important to highlight that the Romans clearly built on top of it, as the newest stonework clearly matches much of the architecture we see in Rome. And here is a curiously significant fact that we should all take a moment to dwell on, which is that Baalbek is 1,400 miles, or over 2,200 kilometers, away from Rome as the bird flies. And by modern road, the distance is actually nearly 2,300 miles, or almost 3,700 kilometers. So here's a big question. Why would the Romans build the most fantastically sophisticated structure in their entire empire thousands of miles from the capital? And here's a fascinating detail to dwell on along with it, which is that the largest single stone in Rome is the 53-ton capital block that makes up part of the Trajan's Column. 53 tons. Which means that the trilithon stones are more than 15 times heavier than the largest stones within the Roman capital. In fact, if you look at the nuanced details of the Colosseum, you'll observe that it is made up of small stones, nothing even remotely comparable to what we see at Baalbek, which, by the way, I haven't even mentioned the 24 enormous 350-ton stones that the trilithons were stacked upon, nor the many other humongous monoliths that weigh over 600 tons that are found throughout the Heliopolis. These stones themselves are some of the largest stones ever cut and moved in human history, and yet they are dwarfed by the trilithons and are somehow a side note. And do you want to hear another enigma that's quite thought-provoking? Well, it is a bizarre fact that the use of the Roman foot measurement was not used at Baalbek. A little known yet significant detail that took me by surprise, as it is further suggestive evidence that the Romans did not construct the foundation of this site. And when you add in the perplexing reality that they did not document who built this, how, or when, it only makes the complex that much more mysterious. In fact, few are even aware that the site of Baalbek itself is actually documented to be prehistoric, with evidence dating back at least 11,000 years. Which, that incredible fact never seems to be mentioned by modern historians and archaeologists when discussing the perplexing mysteries of what was achieved here. And if all of that isn't interesting enough, it only gets more fascinating from here. But let me quickly mention the sponsor of this video, which is birchgold.com. We recently had some monumental news that no one is talking about. For the first time in our history, the interest we pay on the national debt surpassed every individual budget item except for Social Security. That's right, the US now spends more on interest than on national defense or even Medicare. And it's only getting worse as big government continues to spend our tax money like drunken sailors. That's why savvy investors, central banks, and concerned citizens are turning to gold, something that is not tied to the inflated US dollar. And you too can get in on investing in gold with birchgold.com. For over 20 years, the Birch Gold Group has helped thousands of Americans protect their savings by converting an IRA or existing 401k into an IRA of physical gold. To learn more, text Bright Insight to 989-898 and claim your free, no-obligation info kit on gold. Birch Gold has earned my trust with their education-first approach, their thousands of happy customers, and their countless 5-star reviews. Protect your savings now. Text Bright Insight to 989-898 today. The link is in the description and the pinned comment down below. Now, as I was just saying, the perplexing mysteries of Baalbek only get more fascinating from here. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video, the largest stone monoliths ever quarried in human history are also found at this site, and the size and magnitude of which are nothing short of astonishing. This one stone you see here weighs more than 1,200 tons and is 68 feet long and 14 feet tall, very similar to the trilithon stones, although approximately 5 feet longer. However, it gives you some perspective for just how massive the trilithon stones are, as they are virtually the same height. It paints you a picture to the level that the pictures do not do justice. But what's even more remarkable is that there is a stone that was discovered just several years ago that sits behind and below this stone and is estimated at over 1,600 tons, which equates to over 3.5 million pounds. Known as the Forgotten Stone, it measures 19.6 meters long, or 64 feet. It is 6 meters, or just shy of 20 feet wide, and get this, it is 5.5 meters, or 18 feet tall. In other words, this stone is just 2 feet shy of being the height of 2 NBA basketball hoops stacked on top of each other. I cannot begin to state just how insane this site is to witness in person. Pictures do not do it justice, but the mysteries of Baalbek go far beyond the size and magnitude of the stonework, as here is another detail that will blow your mind. As I mentioned, the largest stone columns of classical history are here, which are made up of limestone which was quarried not far away. However, these columns do not include the 200 rose granite columns that once stood at this site. And here is what is so unbelievably wild about them. This rose granite originated from the Aswan quarry in Egypt and is more than 700 miles away, and comes from this same exact Egyptian quarry that is famous for supplying the Great Pyramid's so-called King's Chamber and Grand Gallery with hundreds of rose granite blocks that weigh as much as 80 tons apiece that were transported 500 miles from Aswan, which in itself is a total mystery that's been heavily debated for decades. However, these 200 multi-ton rose granite columns that were transported to Baalbek weren't simply brought here by going down the Nile River and traversing over flatland to Lebanon. Are you ready for this? They had to be carried up and over the Lebanon mountains to reach Baalbek, which averages 2,500 meters or 8,200 feet in elevation, with peaks reaching over 3,000 meters or 10,000 feet. The Lebanon mountains are unbelievably rugged, and few are aware that all of these stone columns had to be carried over this mountain to reach Baalbek. How and why would they go to such profound extent to do this? Unless they had some unknown capability to make this endeavor feasible. It cannot be overstated just how magnificent of an undertaking this was. The Lebanon mountains are no joke, and it is simply a matter of fact that the only way to get these columns to Baalbek was to go over these mountains. And honestly, it's the accumulation of all the nuanced details surrounding the works of Baalbek that make it so compelling for evidence of a lost ancient advanced civilization. Advanced being that the ancients clearly possessed methods or technology that are unbeknown to us today. For example, like I already mentioned, those 800 metric ton trilithon stones were lifted and perfectly stacked some 30 feet off the ground. Yet the largest and most powerful crane the Romans possessed had a max lifting capacity of only 6 metric tons. Well, let's math this out. 800 metric tons divided by 6 metric tons equals 133 of these cranes that would be needed to lift just one of these stones. No, it is simply not remotely feasible to even suggest that they used this as a method. You wouldn't even have the physical space to surround one of these stones with 133 cranes, which only further adds to the mystery. And never mind lifting the stones. How did they even transport them from the quarry to the Heliopolis? Well, there's been different theorized methods, but all of them are totally debunked when you consider the details. For example, one proposed method is that they rolled the stones over tree logs that would have been sourced from the surrounding forest of Lebanon cedar trees, which are massive themselves and are found in abundance throughout the Lebanon mountains. And by the way, this is the tree that's on the country's flag today. So I decided to nerd out on this one and see if it's even possible for wood to support weights of nearly 2 million pounds, and I was surprised at what I learned. Many of you are already familiar with the Mohs scale of hardness, which is used to measure the hardness of stone, which has been a common argument amongst proponents of alternative ancient history to debunk the bronze chisel theories for how Egyptians mysteriously cut granite with such unbelievable precision, being that granite is simply far too hard of a stone for a copper-based chisel or saw to cut and carve. So that got me thinking, is there a similar scale for measuring the strength of wood? Well, the answer is yes, and it's called the Janka scale and measures the hardness and softness of various tree wood throughout the world. So get this, Lebanon cedar literally ranks among the softest wood on earth, so soft that it wouldn't even be considered for wood flooring in your home, as walking on it with heeled shoes or placing furniture on it would dent and smush the wood. So ask yourself, is it even remotely feasible to suggest that this particular species of tree could be used for rolling stones that weigh closer to 2 million pounds? The cedar would either crush instantly or at best be instantly deformed from a circular log and smushed flat on the top and bottom, incapable of being rolled. And you should know that this theorized method has never even been tested on anything even remotely comparable. And it's fair to say that it's debunked, which brings me to the next theorized example, which is by far the most commonly accepted theory, which involves the use of capstans and ropes to slowly pull and drag the stone blocks. However, you're not actually going to be able to do this without rolling the blocks in something in the first place, such as tree logs, as they've suggested, but the flat square shape on the front of the stone itself would simply push it into the earth as you pulled it. And again, this method has never even been tested. How many capstans, ropes, and men would you need to drag a stone weighing 1.75 million pounds over a half mile, or even just a few feet? And think about it, if this method did work, once you got the stone as close to the wall as you possibly could, it does not take into account lifting and perfectly stacking the stones on top of each other. Even if they were to use a dirt ramp, as has been suggested, it does not explain all the physics involved in lining up these stones perfectly as they are and getting them here in the first place. Now, let me share something that I already know people are going to be stating in the comments as a rebuttal to what I just shared, and then I will wrap up this video by sharing two more fascinating details. Many of you would have heard of the Bronze Horseman, or more commonly known as the Thunderstone, which was a statue commissioned by Catherine the Great of Russia in the late 1700s, and is officially the largest stone ever moved by humans. It started at a weight of 1,500 tons and was gradually carved down to 1,250 tons by the end of its move. And this example is used by many to suggest that the ancients, such as the Romans, could surely have moved massive stones in a similar fashion, seeing as people were able to do so in the late 1700s. However, when you research the nuanced details, you quickly find out that this is not even remotely comparable. Besides the fact that it took 400 men a whopping 9 months to move over a relatively short distance, but here's the thing. They moved the Thunderstone with technological means that were not available to the Romans. Not only did they slide the Thunderstone on advanced iron rails, but also on metallic ball bearings that were significantly more advanced than what was available to the Romans. In fact, it is an established fact that metallurgy had significantly advanced in the 18th century, whereas the most advanced form of iron the Romans possessed was not even remotely comparable in strength. But more than that, none of this could have been achieved if it wasn't for the technological invention of the screwjack, which the Romans did not have as it wasn't invented until thousands of years later. And without the screwjack, the Thunderstone would never have been able to have been lifted on top of the rails themselves. This is a fact that cannot be ignored and is totally inappropriate to compare the technological developments of metallurgy of the late 18th century to that of the ancient Romans. And I must give a massive shout out to Dan Richards of the Debunking YouTube channel for bringing these facts to my attention. He has quickly become my favorite YouTube channel and is a wealth of little known information. In fact, he is the one that brought it to my attention that the use of the Roman foot measurement was not used by whoever constructed Baalbek. Seriously, go and hit the subscribe button on his channel right now, as this guy is on the rise and is going to do many awesome things in this space. I cannot recommend him enough. Now, here is something that I think you'll find to be incredibly intriguing involving Baalbek being created by a lost ancient advanced civilization. The name of the forest of cedar trees that make up the Lebanon mountains is called Cedars of the Gods. That's quite interesting considering it is in the region that surrounds Baalbek. It's almost as if legends were carried down about the advanced civilization that once constructed this site. And if you think that sounds far-fetched, wait until you hear this. The Lebanon mountains are mentioned in the Bible a total of 103 times. This land is very ancient in regards to human civilization. But here's what's particularly wild. Tradition states that Baalbek is the most ancient building in the world. Cain, the son of Adam, built it in the year 133 of the creation, and in a fit of raving madness and with the help of giants who are punished for their iniquities by the flood. And this is straight out of the Penn Museum, which is located at the prestigious University of Pennsylvania. That's fascinating. And by the way, the very name Baalbek is something to contemplate as well. The name Baalbek means Lord of Baal, or of the Bakwa Valley, and Baal was said to be the sky god within the Phoenician region. And in the Bible, Baal is the name given to several different deities who were designated as false gods or idols. and Lord Baal has been even associated with demons and the devil. Many will of course dismiss this all as myth. However, myths are known to originate from some form of truth, which over time are carried down into legends and ultimately lost in translation. But it seems to me that they were trying to tell us that the site of Baalbek wasn't simply created by primitive prehistoric tribes playing with stonework. And honestly, I do firmly believe that this site is indeed the remnants of a lost civilization that far exceeds what we were taught or led to believe. However, here is one more particular detail that really stands out to me at Baalbek, which is this symbol here, and I discussed it in a recent video and shared the little known fact that it is a prehistoric symbol that has been inexplicably found on 5 continents around the world and dates back approximately 10,000 years. It's been found in Europe, Asia, Africa, South America, and even throughout Native American tribes of North America 2,200 years ago. Never mind for a moment the modern association of it, which was stolen and bastardized, and focus on the very fact that it is a profoundly ancient symbol and is found on 5 continents long before transoceanic sea travel was thought to be possible. And there it is, found throughout Baalbek, one of the most mysterious and profound ancient sites on Earth. I do not know what the true original meaning of this symbol was. However, it was known to represent peace and good luck before evil people stole it in the last century. However, I do genuinely think that this is something that requires further discussion despite how taboo it is today. Now, I cannot wrap up this video without giving a very special thank you to my friend, legendary UFC fighter George St. Pierre. We connected over a shared interest of the ancients, and I was extremely fortunate to travel with him to Lebanon and Egypt last year. If it weren't for him and his special connections to travel safely to Baalbek, none of this would have been possible. I had the time of my life, and I will be forever grateful for this trip. Now, I will of course say that there are many other examples around the world that are evidence of a lost civilization, whether it's the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Osirion, ancient India, various sites in South America. But there's something very special about Baalbek, which allows us to pretty much debunk the narrative that the Romans had built it. Now, that being said, I will be doing a live stream tomorrow, Saturday the 26th, to discuss the various details in this video. Bring your questions and your comments, and definitely follow me on rumble.com. And follow me on locals.com if you want to support me, or also Patreon, but Locals is preferable. They treat me so much better, and I also do a monthly live Q&A where it's such a small crowd that on my live streams you could ask a question and I'll never see it, but every single question and comment on Locals at my end of the month live stream will be read and commented on. But that being said, my name is Jimmy Corsetti. My channel is called Bright Insight. Hit the like button and subscribe, and leave a comment sharing what your thoughts are on the various details at this site. That said, I'll wrap it up here. Stay tuned to my next video. Take care, everybody.